Hey, I'm Sophia. Before we start, go grab a snack and get comfortable for a bit. These stories take their time, and they are told the way I'd tell a friend late at night. I really hope you enjoy them. This story has one update on it and my own opinion at the end. Comment and tell me if you agree. Let's begin. My stepmom tried to steal my inheritance, so I exposed her lies and built my own empire. The lawyer slid the folder across the polished table like he was offering me a menu, not the paperwork that decided what my life would look like after my dad's funeral. I could still smell the lilies from the service on my coat. My fingers were numb, the kind of numb that starts in your throat and travels down, like your body doesn't want you touching anything real yet. Across from me, Linda, my stepmom, sat with her legs crossed, heel bouncing, eyes fixed on the folder with this tight little smile that didn't reach her face. The room was too quiet. The air conditioner hummed. Somewhere in the building, a printer ran. The lawyer cleared his throat, and I watched Linda's hand drift to the corner of the folder, almost possessive, like it already belonged to her. "Before we begin," she said, voice soft and brittle, "I just want to say I'm doing my best to honor Robert's wishes." She said my dad's name like she was the only one allowed to say it. I felt my stomach twist. "Then stop calling him Robert," I blurted, and my voice cracked the second it came out. Linda's eyes snapped to mine, sharp, offended. "Excuse me," she said. The lawyer looked between us, already regretting his career choices. My palms pressed into my knees, so hard they hurt. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. "He hated being called that," I said, quieter, forcing my voice to steady. "He was Dad. To me." It was a Monday morning, 3 days after we buried him, and the whole thing felt like a continuation of the funeral. Same stiff clothes, same polite faces, same carefully controlled sadness, except now the grief had paperwork. Dad's death wasn't sudden the way people say, when they're trying to avoid details. It was 3 months of hospital corridors and late-night phone calls, and me sitting beside his bed reading emails while he dozed because I couldn't stand the silence. I was 31, old enough to be competent, young enough to still feel like a child when my dad squeezed my hand and tried to smile through morphine. Linda was there too, of course. She sat in the chair like a loyal wife, kept his water topped up, talked to nurses. She even cried. And I'm not saying those tears were fake. I'm saying tears don't automatically make you trustworthy. Because even before Dad was gone, Linda had started acting like she was in charge of what was left. I met Linda when I was 19. My mom died when I was 12, and for a long time it was just me and Dad, two awkward people trying to build a home around a missing person. Dad worked too much, and I grew up fast in small ways, packing my own lunches, filling out permission slips, figuring out how to talk myself down from panic attacks at night when the house got too quiet. When I left for uni, Dad finally did what lonely people do when they're tired of being lonely. He said yes to the first person who made his world feel full again. Linda was the receptionist at his friend's dental clinic, 10 years younger than him, always wearing perfume that smelled like peaches and ambition. She complimented him constantly. "You're such a good father," she'd say, while looking at me like I was proof she deserved a medal for accepting me. He married her 2 years later, and I told myself to be happy because he deserved happiness. What I didn't realize is that Linda didn't just want to join our family. She wanted to replace the hierarchy. The first cracks were tiny. Linda correcting me about Dad's preferences. Linda redecorating the house and putting Mom's photo away because it was sad for Robert. Linda calling me dramatic when I didn't want her wearing my mom's wedding bracelet at a family dinner. When Dad was alive, he'd soften the edges. He'd say, "Girls, please," like a tired referee, and then he'd take me aside later and squeeze my shoulder like he was silently apologizing. The problem with a referee is that when the referee leaves the field, the person who's been pushing boundaries doesn't suddenly become fair. They push harder. Dad had a will. I knew because he'd mentioned it when I bought my first apartment. He'd said, "I've got everything sorted. House goes to you. Linda's taken care of too, don't worry." It wasn't a romantic conversation. It was him being practical, like he always was when feelings got complicated. So when we sat in that office and the lawyer began reading, I thought I was braced. Robert James Carter, the lawyer started, and Linda flinched as if she didn't like hearing his full name spoken by anyone else. The lawyer read standard stuff: executor, debts, funeral expenses. Then he got to the house. The house I grew up in. The house with Mom's garden out back where the lemon tree still grew crooked. The house Dad spent weekends fixing up because he couldn't relax unless he was building something. Linda's heel stopped bouncing. The lawyer said, "The residential property at," he read the address, "is to be placed into a testamentary trust for the benefit of my daughter, Mina Carter." I felt my lungs finally pull in air. And then Linda laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. "That can't be right," she said, leaning forward. "There's been changes." The lawyer paused. "This is the most recent valid will we have on record, signed 18 months ago." Linda's smile returned, tight and controlled. "That's not the most recent," she said. "Robert updated it after his diagnosis. He told me. He wanted to ensure I wasn't left vulnerable." My body went cold. Not because she wanted security, because of how she said it. Like she'd already decided I was a threat to her comfort. The lawyer frowned. "If there is a newer will, it must be produced." Linda reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a folded document like she'd been waiting for a cue. She placed it on the table, with her manicured nails flattening the paper. "Here," she said. "Codicil. Signed 6 weeks ago." My throat tightened. 6 weeks ago, Dad could barely hold a spoon. 6 weeks ago, he asked me to read his text to him because his eyesight was blurry from meds. I stared at the paper and felt something inside me tilt from grief into alarm. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "May I?" Linda's eyes flicked to me. "I'm not trying to take anything from you," she said, voice dripping with martyrdom. "I just need what Robert wanted me to have." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My entire body was focused on one thing: Dad's signature at the bottom of that codicil. The letters looked off, like someone imitating the idea of his handwriting, not his actual hand. Dad's signature had a certain slant, a speed. This one looked slow and careful, trembling in a way that didn't match his tremble. It looked like a performance. The lawyer read silently for a long minute. Then he said, carefully, "This codicil significantly alters the distribution." Linda nodded, satisfied. "Yes," she said, "as it should." I leaned forward. My voice came out low and steady like it had been waiting in my bones. "What does it say?" I asked. The lawyer cleared his throat. "It states that the residential property is to be sold and the proceeds distributed 70% to Linda Carter and 30% to Mina Carter." Linda exhaled as if relieved. Like she'd just won an argument she believed she deserved to win. My fingers curled into my palms, so hard my nails bit skin. "Dad told me the house was mine," I said. Linda's eyebrows lifted. "People say a lot of things when they're healthy," she replied. "When he got sick, reality changed." Something hot rose in my chest. "Reality didn't change," I said. "He did. He got weaker. And somehow you got louder." Linda's smile vanished. "Watch your tone." The lawyer held up a hand. "We will need to verify the codicil," he said. "Witnesses, capacity, formalities." "Ms. Carter, do you know who witnessed this?" Linda waved vaguely. "A friend. And the hospice nurse." The lawyer looked up sharply. "Which nurse?" Linda hesitated, just a fraction. "I don't remember her name." That fraction was everything. I left the office that day with the will copy in my bag and a pounding headache behind my eyes. Linda followed me into the lobby, heels clicking fast, and grabbed my arm like we were sisters. Her nails dug into my skin. "Don't do this," she hissed softly, smile still on for the receptionist. "Don't make me your enemy." I looked down at her hand on my arm and then back up at her face. "You did that yourself," I said, and I pulled my arm away. My skin stung where she'd held me, like a brand. That night, I sat on my apartment floor surrounded by papers and grief, and the kind of anger that makes you feel strangely awake. I called the hospice the next morning and asked for a copy of Dad's patient notes around the date of the codicil. Privacy laws meant they couldn't give me everything, but they could confirm something crucial. Dad was heavily medicated, and he did not have a recorded meeting with any legal professional that week. I contacted the nurse coordinator. She told me no nurse by the description Linda gave worked Dad's shift. I found out the friend witness was Linda's cousin Amelia, the same cousin who once asked Dad at Christmas if he planned to leave everything to his daughter. Dad laughed it off then. I didn't. I remembered. I hired a lawyer. Not the will lawyer, my own. A woman named Grace who spoke in calm sentences and didn't flinch at Linda's antics. Grace took one look at the codicil and said, "We're challenging this." Linda's response was immediate. She moved into Dad's house and changed the locks. She claimed it was for security. She told the neighbors I was unstable and might cause trouble. She canceled the home insurance and took out a new policy in her name. Then she listed the house for sale, without telling me. That's when my grief turned into something sharper than sadness. Grace filed an injunction to prevent the sale. Linda freaked out and left me a voicemail at midnight, voice trembling with rage. "You think you're so smart," she spat. "You're just a selfish little girl who can't share." I listened to that voicemail 3 times, not because it hurt, but because it was proof. Linda wasn't trying to honor Dad. She was trying to win. The court process was slow and humiliating. It's not glamorous to fight for your father's will. It's paperwork, deadlines, affidavits. It's describing your family's worst moments in sterile language while strangers decide if your grief is legally relevant. Linda's lawyer argued that Dad wanted to secure his spouse's future, and that I was financially stable. They suggested I was being greedy. Linda even had the audacity to tell a mediator, "Mina has always resented me. She's using this to punish me." I wanted to scream. Instead, Grace taught me the most important thing. Don't argue feelings with someone who's weaponizing them. Argue facts. We ordered a forensic handwriting analysis. We subpoenaed medical records relevant to capacity. We collected messages Dad sent me around that time, him asking me to remind him to take meds, him sending voice notes because his hands shook too much to type. We interviewed the hospice staff. We dug into Linda's finances because Grace suspected motive. That's where we found the real rot. Linda had been taking loans from Dad's accounts for months. Small at first, hundreds then thousands. Labeled house expenses. But Dad's house expenses were already paid through a joint budget. Linda had also tried to refinance the house while Dad was alive, claiming it was for medical costs. The medical costs were covered by insurance and Dad's savings. The refinance attempt had failed because Dad didn't sign. Or, more accurately, he refused. I found a text from Dad to me from 8 weeks before he died. "Linda's stressing me about the house. If she brings it up again, tell her I already sorted it." I stared at that text until my eyes burned. He knew. He'd been protecting me even while he was dying. The day of the hearing, Linda walked into the courthouse in a black dress like she was still at a funeral, mascara perfect, lips pale. She hugged people in the hallway and let them think she was the tragic widow being attacked by her ungrateful stepdaughter. I watched her from across the corridor and felt something in me steady. If she wanted a performance, fine. I'd bring receipts. On the stand, Linda cried. She said Dad promised her the house. She said she'd sacrificed everything to care for him. She said I abandoned them. I visited 4 times a week and spent nights there. She said the codicil was Dad's wish because he felt guilty for leaving her vulnerable. She kept calling him Robert. It made my teeth ache. Then Grace asked her the simplest question. Who arranged the codicil? Linda blinked. Robert did. Grace nodded. And who contacted the witnesses? Linda hesitated. He did. Grace leaned slightly forward. While heavily medicated, with limited motor function. He arranged witnesses, contacted them, and signed a document that benefits you 70%, without informing his daughter or his lawyer. Linda's eyes flashed. He didn't need to inform her. She's not his wife. Grace paused. No. She's his child. Linda's jaw tightened. That anger peeked out again, raw and ugly. Grace then presented the hospice staffing roster proving the nurse Linda claimed as witness did not exist. Linda's face went tight. She tried to pivot. Maybe it was a different nurse. Grace held up the forensic report. The signature on the codicil shows indications of simulation, she said calmly. In plain terms, it is highly likely the signature was forged. Linda's face drained. She looked at the judge, then at her lawyer, like someone had pulled the floor away. Grace wasn't done. She introduced the bank statements. Mrs. Carter, she asked, can you explain these transfers into your personal account totaling $46,000 over 5 months? Linda's mouth opened, closed. That was for expenses. Grace nodded. Which expenses? There are no invoices. No receipts. And the transfers continued after the expenses were already paid. Did Mr. Carter authorize those transfers? Linda's voice rose. We were married. It was our money. Grace's tone stayed even. And yet you felt the need to alter the will. That line landed in the courtroom like a slap. Linda started crying again, louder this time, but it wasn't the controlled widow cry. It was panic. The judge ruled the codicil invalid. The original will stood. The house went into trust for me. Linda received what Dad intended, cash assets and a smaller amount plus a short-term allowance to relocate. The judge also ordered an investigation into the transfers. I walked out of court into bright afternoon sun and felt like I was stepping into air after months underwater. I wanted to collapse. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to call Dad and tell him I protected what he meant for me, and then the grief hit me like a wave because I couldn't. And this is where I'm going to pause the story midway like you asked, because the court win was only half the battle. Winning on paper doesn't automatically make your life peaceful. Linda is the kind of person who uses softness like camouflage. She'll cry, hug, talk about honoring wishes, and the second it stops working, she turns sharp and possessive. Her biggest tell is that she never really spoke about my dad as a person, she spoke about him as a resource. Even her grief had this edge of entitlement, like being his wife meant she deserved the whole outcome. She also underestimated something important. People like Linda assume you'll shrink because they've trained you to. They expect you to be polite, to avoid conflict, to feel guilty for defending yourself. My dad, for all his flaws, clearly saw who she was because that text about her stressing him about the house is basically him waving a flag from his hospital bed. The legal system isn't romantic, but it's one of the few places where feelings don't matter as much as proof, and Linda fell apart when proof arrived. I also want to point out how gross it is when families call a daughter greedy for wanting what her parent intentionally left her. Linda didn't just want money. She wanted to erase me from the story and become the main character. As for me, I'm proud I didn't try to win with screaming. I won by being stubborn, organized, and willing to be seen as difficult. Women get punished socially for being difficult, but being easy is exactly how people like Linda steal from you. Update. Okay, so the court ruling happened about 8 months ago. I posted initially because I was still shaking from the hearing, and honestly, I didn't expect so many people to relate. A lot of you warned me about the aftermath, and you were right. The legal win didn't stop Linda from trying to punish me socially and emotionally. It just changed the battlefield. First, Linda refused to move out of Dad's house, even though the judge's order was clear. The house was in trust, but she treated it like a squatter's rights situation. She stayed, used utilities, and left the place in a constant state of temporary mess. Laundry piles, half-empty boxes, the fridge full of expired food. Every time I tried to schedule an inspection, she'd suddenly have a medical appointment or claim she was unwell. It was delay tactics, and it worked for a while because I didn't want to be the evil stepdaughter throwing a widow out. Grace said something that snapped me out of it. Mina, you're not evicting a widow. You're enforcing a court order against someone who forged documents. So we did it properly. Formal notice. Sheriff's service. Date. She left eventually, but not quietly. The day she moved out, she accidentally took boxes that weren't hers. My mother's jewelry, old family photo albums, even a small wooden box of my dad's letters to my mom that I didn't know existed until I found them in his drawer during the inventory. When I realized, my chest went cold in a different way than court fear. Those weren't assets. Those were history. I called her. She didn't answer. I texted. No response. I drove to her sister's place because that's where she'd moved temporarily, and her sister opened the door like she'd been waiting for a fight. "Linda doesn't want to see you," she said. I said, "She took things that don't belong to her." The sister smiled, nasty. Everything belonged to her husband. I stood there on the porch, hands shaking, and realized this wasn't about money anymore. This was about control. Linda didn't just want to walk away with cash. She wanted to take pieces of my dad's life that proved I existed in it before her. Grace filed a demand letter for return of personal property. Linda sent back a reply through her lawyer claiming she had no knowledge of the items. So we went through the moving inventory. We used witness statements from the removalists. We had neighbors who saw her loading boxes labeled Mina into her car. It became absurd, legal paperwork over photo albums, but I refused to let her rewrite my family story by theft. Then came the investigation into the transfers. This part was uglier than I expected because when you open that door, you see the full scope of someone's behavior. The financial investigator found that Linda had been moving money not just into her account, but into her cousin Amelia's account too, then moving it back in smaller amounts. Classic wash behavior to make it harder to track. She'd also opened a credit card in my dad's name and used it for house expenses that were actually salon appointments, online shopping, a weekend at a coastal resort. The dates were during the period she told everyone she was sleeping in a chair by his bed. When that came out, some family members who had called me greedy suddenly went quiet. Not all of them, of course. There will always be people who hate a boundary more than they hate wrongdoing. But enough people saw it that Linda's social narrative started cracking. Linda tried one last major play. She told everyone I drove Dad into stress, and that stress made him worse. She said I took him to court from the grave. She even went to my dad's old church and cried to the priest about how I was punishing her. The priest called me to mediate. I said no. I'm not mediating with someone who forged a signature. Meanwhile, I was trying to live. That's the part people don't see. The court stuff consumes your brain like a parasite. You're grieving, you're reading legal documents, you're answering family calls, you're trying to go to work and pretend you're normal. Some nights I'd come home, sit on my kitchen floor, and just stare because my body couldn't do one more thing. Then something shifted. I was cleaning out Dad's study, really cleaning, not just moving boxes, and I found a notebook in his desk. Not a journal. More like Dad's practical notes. Repairs needed, contacts, expenses. But tucked in the back was a page labeled Mina. Under it he'd written, in his messy handwriting, a list of things he wanted for me. House. Security. No debt. Freedom. He'd drawn a little square next to each like a checklist. It wrecked me. I sat on the floor holding that notebook and cried until my ribs hurt. But it also lit something in me. Dad didn't leave me the house, so I could cling to it like a museum. He left it so I'd have a base. Stability. A platform. So I used it. I didn't sell immediately because I wasn't ready. But I leveraged the security of the trust to take a calculated risk with my career. I'd been working in procurement and project management for years, good at systems, negotiation, spotting waste. I started a small consultancy, helping mid-sized companies fix their supply chain processes, reduce costs, and improve compliance. Boring to some people, lucrative to the right people. I began with one client. An old colleague who trusted me. Then 2. Then 5. I worked from Dad's old dining table at first because it felt grounding, like he was near. Within 6 months, my consultancy income replaced my salary. Within a year, I hired my first employee, an operations assistant named Nura, who had 2 kids and the sharpest mind I've ever met. We landed a contract with a construction group that doubled our revenue. I registered the business properly, built a website, started speaking at industry events. Every time I stepped on a stage, I could hear Linda's voice in my head saying, "Ungrateful," and I'd answer it by doing the work anyway. Then I bought a small warehouse space, tiny, nothing glamorous, and turned it into a shared logistics hub for small businesses. Storage, packaging, dispatch partnerships. Basically, I built infrastructure that helped other people not drown in the same messy systems I spent my career fixing. It grew. Not overnight. Not magically, but steadily. The kind of growth that comes from competence, not hype. Linda, meanwhile, didn't stop losing. The investigation resulted in a settlement agreement. She had to repay a portion of the stolen funds to the estate or face criminal proceedings. She paid. Not because she was sorry, because she wanted it to end. She also had to return the stolen personal items. Some came back damaged. Some didn't come back at all. The letters to my mom were missing. That's the wound that still aches. But here's the part that felt like the real empire moment. I stopped defining my life by what Linda tried to take. I built something that didn't depend on her failure or my dad's death. I used the stability Dad left me as a foundation, and I made it bigger. I made it mine. Okay, now I'll continue and finish the story. 2 months ago, I hosted a small opening event for the shared hub. Not a gala, not a revenge parade. Just a gathering for clients and local business owners. I kept it warm. Food trucks, simple music, a short speech, then networking. I invited a few family members I still spoke to, my aunt who actually checked on me during the court case, my cousin who helped me paint the warehouse walls. I did not invite Linda. She came anyway. I was in the back, checking that the signage wasn't crooked, when I saw her near the entrance. Same perfume. Same tight smile. She wore a cream blazer like she was trying to look respectable. For a second, my body did that old thing. Freeze, brace. Then I saw Nura at the front, greeting guests, laughing. I saw my logo on the wall. I saw the forklifts humming in the background, the space that existed because I decided to build instead of collapse. And I felt calm. Linda walked up to me, like she had every right. Mina, she said, voice soft. This is impressive. Why are you here? Her smile quivered. I heard about it. I thought I should support you. I almost laughed. You tried to forge my father's signature, I said quietly. You don't get to use the word support. Linda's face tightened. That was complicated. No, I said. It was illegal. She glanced around, maybe aware that people could see us. Can we talk privately? I shook my head. There's nothing to talk about. Her eyes flashed with something, anger, desperation. You really want me to be the villain forever? I held her gaze. You did villain things, I replied. I'm just not rewriting them to make you comfortable. Linda's lips pressed together. Then she tried the last card. Your father would hate this, she whispered. How cold you've become. My chest tightened, but I didn't react the way she wanted. I took a breath and said, my father wrote a list called Mina with the word freedom on it. I think he'd love that I'm finally free. Linda went still. For the first time, her eyes looked genuinely scared. Not of me, but of the fact that she couldn't control the story anymore. Nuraz appeared beside me like she sensed the shift. Everything okay? She asked, calm but firm. Linda looked at her, then back at me, realizing this wasn't the old dynamic where I stood alone and tried to be polite. I had a team now. A life. Witnesses. Linda forced a smile. Of course, she said, too sweet. I was just congratulating Mina. Noura nodded once, not buying it. Great, she said. Enjoy the event. Linda lingered for a second, then turned and walked out. After she left, my hands shook a little, not because she had power, but because grief still lives in my body, like old weather. I stepped outside, breathed in the cool air, smelled food and eucalyptus and diesel. Then I went back inside and gave my speech. I thanked the people who showed up. I talked about building systems that help others. I didn't mention Linda. I didn't give her that oxygen. Later that night, when the event was done and the lights were off, I sat alone at my desk in the warehouse office. Dad's notebook was in my bag. I took it out and traced the word freedom with my finger. My eyes burned. I whispered, I did it. like he could hear me through whatever comes after. And for the first time since he died, the grief didn't feel like drowning. It felt like carrying. Linda is a professional victim with a talent for soft voice manipulation. She didn't walk into my dad's life to love him. She walked in to acquire him. The will wasn't an emotional document to her. It was a shopping list, and when she didn't like the prices, she tried to change the tags. Forging a signature isn't a mistake. It's a choice you make when you believe the world owes you something you didn't earn. The worst part is how she tried to weaponize grief. Showing up in widow black, crying on cue, telling people I was punishing her, because she knows society is quicker to shame a daughter for being cold than it is to hold a stepmother accountable for being predatory. My dad, honestly, is complicated. I loved him deeply, and I believe he tried, but he also enabled Linda for too long because conflict exhausted him, and he wanted peace. The text about her stressing him over the house proves he knew what she was doing, but he still let it reach a point where I had to fight a legal battle while grieving. That's the part that still hurts. He protected me in the end, but he could have protected me earlier by drawing harder lines while he was alive. As for me, I'm proud of the kind of empire I built because it isn't fantasy revenge. It's not me becoming a billionaire overnight or humiliating Linda at a holiday dinner with a dramatic monologue. It's me learning the boring, powerful skills that actually change your life. Documentation, boundaries, refusing guilt as currency, using stability as a platform instead of a shrine. The most entertaining part to me is that Linda expected my inheritance to be her payday, but it became my launch pad. She tried to steal my foundation, and instead she taught me how to build walls with locks. If Linda deserves anything, it's not my forgiveness. It's the permanent discomfort of knowing she failed. Not just in court, but in her attempt to erase me. I'm still here, louder and steadier than she ever wanted, and the life I'm building is full of people who don't need to forge signatures to belong. That's the real win.